We heard from new TCU defensive coordinator Andy Avalos for the first time really since he took the job. He thinks this has the potential to be a very dynamic defense, and he said they're pretty far ahead when it comes to installing these new concepts. We'll talk about that and more next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Horned Frogs your first listen. We're brought to you by Gametime today. If you need tickets to a TCU football game or a concert, Cowboys game, whatever the case is, buy those tickets at Gametime. Locked On College is the promo code. You get you $20 off. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, subscribe wherever it is you like to listen to podcasts. Locked On Horned Frogs is a podcast. We're free and available wherever you listen or watch podcasts. Okay, today, Andy Avalos spoke with the media after practice. Kendall Briles also had some comments. We're going to focus more on the defense today. I thought this was interesting and cool, mainly because we haven't heard from Andy since he took the job. Not that he's been under wraps, but there just hasn't been a lot of opportunities to put him in front of the media yet. And he gave the assembled media there a good 20 minutes talking about personnel, talking about scheme, where they are, and there were some good updates. So things that stood out to me. One, he was asked about fall camp, how far ahead are they compared to the spring? And he said, look, in the first week of fall camp, it's almost like you're starting over again because you have that break in the summer. So you have some new faces also that you're trying to acclimate to the system, but you're reintroducing the fundamentals, the base concepts, the things that you want this defense to be about. He did say, though, that the guys caught on really quickly, and by the end of the first walkthrough, the defensive coaching staff kind of looked at each other and said, you know what, I feel like we're way ahead of where we were in spring practice, which is encouraging news. He also went on to say that they are at about 95% when it comes to install. And he went on to detail that basically all the fronts, all the coverages, a lot of the things within the base defense have been taught, have been processed. They're putting them into practice. The things they have to work on now are, okay, what do we do in certain situations? How do we react to how the offense lines up? How do we react to different schemes and situational football? And that's going to continue to progress and come as the season moves on and they start playing games. This is a new defense. There's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some busted coverages, some missed assignments. As much as you want to prep for it in practice, and I'll share in a minute how different preparation is now, even compared to a few years back, and just how professionalized all this is. At the same time, when the game's happening and it's live and real and you're not going against your own offense and there's a lot of elements of surprise that happen week to week, there has to be an adjustment period. That being said, it's crazy to listen to these coaches talk about how much goes into the preparation, how much they expect from these players, what they do during practice, during the team designated times, but also just outside of those times on their own. They're working on this really diligently, and they've got most of the defense installed now. He said they've already started looking at their opponents during these practices. He said that started in the summer, where they were introducing, okay, these are the offensive concepts that we're going to see this year. And there's a big test right away against the Stanford team that wasn't great last year, but just from a personnel standpoint, he mentioned they're going to have a fullback in there. They're going to have a lot of double tight end sets, 12 personnel, pro-style offense, a lot of heavy sets where they're coming downhill and running at you. TCU did not perform well in those situations last year. They have to stand up better against the run this season. And he said the first 6 or 7 practices, Coach Avalos said the first 6 or 7 practices of fall camp, they've been very focused on stopping the run. Because if you can't stop the run, your defense is going to be bad. That's just how it is. Even in this day and age where people throw the ball all over the place, that's just football 101. So they're trying to get to a place where they're very physical They've had some good tests against the O-line. Coach Avalos says the TCU offensive line is coming along well. Coach Ricker's doing a good job. They're physical. And so they've tried to match that intensity from the jump. Run defense-wise, you're losing Dominic Williams, which is a big loss. But there's some guys in the interior that aren't going to make up his production but should be able to hold their own. And I think the bigger deal with this defense is flowing fast to the football, understanding your run fits, changing things up, disguising looks, confusing the offensive line, and using those opportunities to make big plays and be disruptive on the defensive side of the football. So all of that is super promising. But that Stanford game is going to be a good test because you know what they're going to do. Like, they're going to run the ball until you stop it. And TCU didn't really face a ton of teams. I mean, Kansas State had that vibe, and they obviously ate TCU's lunch last year. But even K-State, I mean, they're not getting under center a lot. It's still a lot of spread concepts, but running the ball, power football, those types of things. Not many teams. I mean, West Virginia sort of did it. Like, they figured some things out with Garrett Green last season. Iowa State, same type of thing. It's going to look different, though, the way Stanford goes about it and the way they approach it. And the defense will have to be ready for that when they open the season 3 weeks from tomorrow. Man, it's crazy. It's happening fast. It's going to be here. And, yeah, we're going to see this team on the field for the first time in a long time. Okay, at the corner position, losing Avery Hellman, Vernon Glover. Maybe I'm reading too much into his answer. He didn't sound super hopeful about what type of timetable this was going to be for those guys. He's like, we miss those guys. We love them. We want them back as soon as possible, but we got to get other people ready. And you heard the typical football line of next man up, getting players reps so they can be ready. But he went on to point out, and this was kind of surprising to me, when he was talking about possible replacements or how they're going to approach the absence of those guys, he mentioned the young corners, like the freshman corners who are on campus, and giving them a lot of opportunities to try to make something happen. Devondre McGee, Julian Knox. Now, I mentioned those players yesterday, but it was more in like, hey, these are some names to know as far as guys that could be the future, but not positive about what they can do this upcoming season. But Coach Avalos did say they're going to use this opportunity to get these players as many reps as possible so that the talent can take over and sort of meld with the experience. He also mentioned Jamal Johnson as a young safety that he really likes. And he talked about Cam Smith, the transfer from Memphis, and what he's done so far this offseason and his ability to just understand the defense. Said he's bulked up, and they like him playing, on the boundary. And there's going to be situations where they have him and Jamal Johnson on the field at the same time. That's a pretty athletic bunch in the back end of that defense. Can those guys force turnovers? Can they make big plays? Can they make things happen at the point of attack? Those will all be questions that need to be answered as the season gets started up. But, yeah, Cam Smith from Memphis, one of those transfer players to know. I said yesterday TCU could really use a big year from some of those guys that I don't say taking chances in a negative way, but last offseason had some players that were banged up, and a few of those guys are back this year with a chance to sort of flip that narrative, like Dalen Wright and JoJo Earl in the receiver room. But from a DB perspective, Andy and that coaching staff, they brought in a lot of players after they took this job. So it's pretty clear that they looked at what they had on the board and said, you know what, we need to change the personnel a little bit, get more athletic, get bigger. And they went and found some guys who hopefully can really play, and they're excited about Cam Smith and what he can do. Another player that last season I would say probably most fans were disappointed with what he did or what he brought to the table because he was such an impactful part of the defense a couple of years ago. Bud Clark, Steven Johnson from the 4-Star Telegram asked Coach, like, okay, what do you see from Bud Clark as a dude who's just been here for a long time, has played at a high level and understands this defense? And he said that the first thing about Bud that he's noticed is the guy just never gets tired. Like, his energy level is off the charts, and he's always wanting to learn, wanting to understand, get more reps in. And he also mentioned that his football IQ has really expanded through learning this new defense. And if you look at where he's at in the fall as opposed to the spring, like, things are starting to slow down. He's understanding like what he needs to do. He's making calls. He's starting to see, okay, this is how teams are going to attack us. This is how they're going to come after us. We have to adjust and make plays. And so Bud Clark, who, he's a ball hawk at times. He's made some huge plays through the years. Hopefully he's more comfortable. Another guy that kind of falls in that mix, Johnny Hodges, and he said he really likes this linebacker crew. They got some legit field generals there, with Caleb Alarms-Orr and Shad Banks and Johnny Hodges, and there's versatility in some different types of players that should be able to step up and play at a high level. I hope this is a big year for Johnny. And I said this yesterday. I think there's a place for him in this defense. It was a struggle at times last season, but there's opportunities for him to be more than just a run stuff, or even that's something he can do well. And as Coach said at the beginning of this press conference, like, there's been a huge emphasis on having that physicality and having that ability to slow down teams on the ground, because you have to do that. Like, if you don't, you're just not going to be a successful football team. So they're trying to work on that and make sure that the team's going to be ready to go in that regard when the season starts against a very physical team like Stanford. So some really good answers, and we'll get more in segment 2. We'll get some more of Andy's thoughts and just kind of how it pertains to the team itself. But I'm excited about this defense. I think it's going to be fun to watch them progress as the year goes on. And they have some big tests early in the season. I mean, I talked about Stanford and just how they come at you in their personnel groupings, but also UCF and SMU. UCF expected to be one of the best offenses in the Big 12. SMU throws it around, and they can do some really cool things with their skill positions. So right off the bat, this team will figure out like how good this defense is and how much they can lean on them this upcoming season. When we come back, we'll get more of Andy's thoughts. A player that he's impressed with and his ability to come in and process a transfer might be a little under the radar. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Well, I said it at the top of the show. If you need tickets to an event, sporting event, concert, comedy show, whatever it is, make sure you use the Gametime app. There's a lot of things to love about the Gametime app. One thing that I really like is if you're someone who kind of puts things off and doesn't always get stuff done in a timely fashion, then Gametime's the perfect app for you, because there's always last-minute deals. Even up to an hour before the event starts, you can find some good deals on the Gametime app. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your purchase. Again, that's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your purchase. Gametime, they've got it all for you. No hidden fees. I mean, there's some fees involved, but they're going to be very upfront about what they are, so that when you click on that ticket, it will tell you this is exactly what you're paying and this is going to be it. You don't go to the checkout and suddenly there's like a $30 hike before you actually put your card information in there and buy the tickets. Go straight to your wallet on your phone, very hassle-free. They give you a great view and understanding of what you're going to be seeing when you sit down. This is what your view of the field is going to be. This is what your view of the stage is going to be. Make it all possible for you on the Gametime app. Download it today. Promo code is LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Up to the day of the event, hours before the event, you can find good deals on the Gametime app. Flash deals, sales, it's all there for you. Gametime, LOCKEDONCollege is the promo code. Get $20 off your first purchase. In segment 1, I mentioned that it's really wild to hear these coaches talk, and I've discussed this over the offseason. I mean, college football is a professional sport. Like, that's just what it is at this point. We can lament all the changes that have happened, and I understand that a lot of people don't like it, but it's crazy to hear these coaches discuss their responsibilities, the things they expect from the players. One thing that really stood out to me when Coach Avalos was talking to the media today, he mentioned Cooper McDonald, who is an outside linebacker. He's going to be one of those edge rusher, stud linebacker players, new position in this defense. And he wasn't part of spring practice. He came in over the summer. He had to finish up some stuff at San Diego State, similar to Cade Bennett. Unfortunately, Cade Bennett, when he got there, has an injury issue, and so he's not going to be able to play this year. But McDonald's healthy, and he's been going through practice, getting some reps there with the ones. And Coach said, listen, he's a guy that did his work before he got here. He took it upon himself to understand the defense, to digest the playbook, so that when he stepped on campus, he was ready to go. And that's really awesome. Like, great job by him to take that initiative and get it done and understand what he would need to do to thrive in this defense. But it also felt like he was talking about a free agent in the NFL, right? Like, guy that goes from the Jags to the the Raiders in the offseason, and they have to learn a new scheme, get all the verbiage down, get the playbook finalized so that when they come into camp, they're ready to rock and roll, and that's just what's expected of them. And I know for a while it's been trending that way, but I think even 5-10 years ago that those weren't things that you were hearing about. Of course, pre-transfer portal, you weren't really hearing about that, but from these coaches and what they're asking the athletes to do, but also what the athletes are taking upon themselves to learn and understand before they get into the swing of practice. But he also said that they feel like they're 2 or 3 deep at that spot. So Devin Deal, Cooper McDonald, maybe a guy like Marcel Brooks or Jonathan Bax. That's encouraging to hear, because when Joe Gillespie took over, one of the big things that everybody noticed or talked about immediately was, man, there's really not many players on that defense when he took the job, or I guess any, honestly, other than Sonny Nisi, who had the body type that you would want for that true nose guard position, where you're taking up a ton of space in the interior, you're having to take on double teams and be kind of that immovable object at the point of attack so that linebackers and safeties and other defensive linemen can come and make plays. And so they had to go get Dominic Williams. Well, they didn't have to, but they chose to go get Dominic Williams, a late flip from Cal in that recruiting class. And then he ended up starting as a true freshman because there just weren't many players available that could do what he could do. And the stud linebacker position is sort of similar in that there weren't a lot of players on the current roster that really fit that mold. Thankfully, they were able to get Johnson back in the fold after he initially hit the transfer portal, but they worked really hard to help him understand, hey, there's a spot for you within this defense. We're really excited about what you could do, and I think it would make more sense for you to play here now. They also brought in some players like Deal and like McDonald that can fit that versatility and that speed that they want on the outside. But it sounds like they have some different options, and that's a spot that you're going to want to rotate. And, I hope it all comes together for Marcel Brooks this year. We've heard about him a lot, and his athleticism, his ability. And so this is a season where if he can put it together, even as just a situational pass rusher, that could make a huge difference for this defense. And, we saw some big plays, a huge tackle he had against Kansas on a swing pass a couple of years back. That was big time. Like, the athleticism is there. It's just about finding the right way to have him attack in this new defensive front. And Coach also mentioned, so one new thing this year, helmet communication. Offense and defenses coach will be able to talk directly to their players like they do in the NFL. And he said, look, we can't use it as a crutch because it's going to go out sometimes because technology is technology. And so we still have to understand all the signals, know that if everything breaks down, we have to have a way to communicate to our players, hey, this is how we're getting you the information you need. But he also said he's very curious to see how it's going to affect tempo in offenses. Will you see some teams that huddle up a lot more because they're not going with the wristband anymore? They're not going with the hand signals and the signs. They have actual direct communication with the quarterback, and so they can take their time to get the play call in to make sure everybody's on the same page and then get out of there and snap the football. Yeah, that's a fascinating question because, there's a lot. Kendall Browse included is an offensive coordinator and part of that tree where tempo is such a big part of what they do and what they're trying to kind of get across the defense. Is it worth it to slow it down if it means it costs you something with offensive production? But good to hear from Andy Avalos. I'm super excited to see what his defense can do this upcoming season. And really this whole defensive staff, the way they're able to stay together was really encouraging. And I like what, potentially they could bring to the table this year and just the splash plays that we're hopefully going to get from this defense moving forward. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. Okay, before we go, so on yesterday's show, I talked about injuries during fall camp, and unfortunately, Cade Bennett, who they thought would be a starting guard for them most likely this year, he's out for the year, has a back issue, he's going to have surgery. Now, Coach Dykes did say James Brockermeyer and Colton Deary currently fighting for that center spot, and there's a good chance that whoever loses that battle could just slide over to guard and could still be part of, the 5 guys that they're running out there as starters on a weekly basis. But they're trying to get all that sorted out. And then at corner, losing Avery Hellman, and Glover is a big deal. And it's something they're going to have to, find talent that can do this and can play at a high level on the outside with a lot more press coverage and man-to-man being the goal. Matt Clark said not being solidified at corner is a serious problem. Let's remember that GP might still be the coach if he didn't have to start season in 2021. Big hole in the defense that everyone exploited. It might have been the ultimate downfall of Coach P. CJ Caesar catching a stray there. He did make some plays through his career, but yeah, that was a rough time. The whole defense was bad that season. I think that's worth noting. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop the pass. It wasn't about one player. But I understand your point. Corner is a huge position. There's no hiding somebody who can't cover in one-on-one situations. It just makes for a mess of a defensive time. And so they're going to have to, whether it's relying on those young guys or some of the transfer veterans that they have house right now, they're going to have to find a way to be competitive. And if that pass rush is going to work, you have to have guys that can cover at least momentarily so that your pass rushers can win those battles and wreak havoc on the quarterback. So that'll be a big storyline to watch. Fall camp continues to roll on. We got one more day of shows this week, and we'll be right back at it as we get closer and closer to that season opener against Stanford. Locked On Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day.